So Trump's Twitter banning, good idea, bad idea? Where are you at on that?
Uh, well, it's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
It's a stupid. Okay, this is again. It's like it's very similar to impeachment. It's when after this riot occurred, which we'll talk about more later. Even though we're kind of doing this backwards, but whatever.
We can go to whichever one you want. If you want to talk
No,
about the
no, no.
riot first, we can.
We'll flow the normal flow of conversation. But
Oh, I hate normal flow.
I know, right? Um, when after the riot, well, while the riot was occurring and after the riot occurred, it was like everyone, almost everyone, was on one side of the issue. They're all saying this is bad. The riot is bad, and actually, lots of people, even Trump supporters, were saying that Trump's response to this was not strong enough as it needed to be.
Right.
So it reminded me of George Floyd. It was like after the event, everyone was on board. Everyone was like, "Oh, like this is so bad. We need to do something about this." And then what happens? People riot and they just totally fuck up. They just destroy.
Well, just on the Trump response, you're talking about the video that he put up on Twitter. Trump put a video up that said, you know, they stole this election from us. This election was stolen, but go home in peace. It was kind of a mixed message.
Yeah, it was a mixed bag. It was the "I love you, but go home." Which, first of all, I don't personally have a huge problem with that.
Yeah, I was
video.
The fact Twitter removed this video, and I thought, what the fuck? Trump finally says stop, like go home, and you're going to take the video down.
Right. No, that to me is crazy. And I don't actually have a big problem with what he said, because to me, it's like, okay, if you're trying to convince an angry mob riot of people, you're not going to say, "Hey, listen up, fuckheads. You're all stupid."
Yeah,
or you're
totally.
Not gonna, or you're not going to say, "Hey, I just lied to you for the entire, half a year about, the election being stolen." Obviously, he's not going to say that. So if you listen to it, it actually does follow, I hate to say it, it does follow a lot of the Scott Adams persuasion techniques, where at first he's like trying to say that he's on your side. He's like, "I understand exactly how you feel. They stole it from us. I'm totally on board with everything that you believe, but you have to go home. This isn't the way to do it. You have to go home." So I don't actually have any problem with what his statement was whatsoever.
I agree 100%. I thought it was a pitch perfect message for the audience that he was speaking to.
Right.
The problem is the other side is never going to give you any generosity at all. Never going to embrace the principle of generosity. So they're going to completely mischaracterize that, which they did immediately when I went on Twitter and was like castigating them for deleting the video.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
And then another issue is that people, when someone's trying to make a persuasive video, which I would argue that this was a persuasive video trying to persuade people not to riot.
Yes, I agree.
People will always, you have to say things in different ways to persuade different groups of people. And so if you're not the group of person that is actively trying to be persuaded, you will perceive the information differently.
Correct.
And so all the people who weren't rioting were looking at that video and they're like, "Well, this doesn't persuade me that he's not in favor of the riots."
Exactly.
Which wasn't, I would argue, was not the intention of the video in the first place.
So the intention was to get people to go home.
Was to get people
to knock it off.
I was wondering, this would have been, here's my thought. Would this have been the alpha move? Would this have been the supreme move if Trump would have actually physically shown up at the Capitol while people were inside rioting? Like say they like constructed a stage. Maybe this wouldn't be logistically possible because of security concerns. But what if while the people are inside the building rioting, they construct a stage and Trump comes up and they puts on the loudspeakers and he says, "Your president's here. Like, everyone come outside. I want to talk to you. Everyone come outside. I want to talk to you." Like, would that have worked?
It would have. They would have evacuated the building immediately.
And then they all crowd around, and then he can give his speech about how, like, he could say what he said in the video, but he could have said to them in person. Would that have made things worse or better?
Oh, I don't know.
Because that's the question.
Yeah. Once people were killed, I feel like he threw his electoral chances in 2024 away. I feel like he has no chance of recovering after this. That's my
I think you're
feeling.
probably right. I
Yeah.
think you're probably right.
So
But anyway, we kind of got off track for a second. But about the Twitter the Twitter ban.
mhm.
My point was that after George Floyd, everyone was on the side, and then the people rioted, and they completely like destroyed the credibility of the movement, and they started to divide the issue because not even the people rioting, but the reaction to the people rioting. Like if the people rioted, everyone said that was awful and bad and fuck those people, then maybe everyone still could have been on the side of police reform, but they didn't. They started making excuses for the riots during George Floyd. And so I feel like the left is doing the same thing in regards to this. At first, everyone is on board with that this riot on Capitol Hill was awful. And many people were denouncing Trump's response to it. And then what happens is Trump gives his, I would argue, his first concession speech.
Yes.
And it's funny because people, this was not the 1 minute speech. This was the 3 minute speech he gave. Was it the next day or was it that night? I think it was the next day.
Yeah.
And it's funny because so many people listen to that and they're like, oh my God, this is the first time he's ever sounded like a president in his entire 4 years. Because he gives this like normal, he gave like a normal speech that people were like, oh, finally. So he gives a normal speech. And then the response to that is to ban him from everything because he finally did the thing you wanted him to do?
Yeah.
How does that work? Because you're basically then just signaling to other people, hey, don't ever capitulate. Don't ever,
Yeah.
be moderate, because the second you do, they're going to, scalp you.
Yeah. No. I feel like a lot of what's going on is just utter miscommunication between both sides. Like they're reading into him trying to de-escalate as him escalating, and
Right.
vice versa. I mean, there's just as much of that going on with the right of misunderstanding the left. Although I don't necessarily know if it goes that way as much, simply because this shit Joe Biden is saying, I don't know that you could, like, how is it anywhere close to de-escalation? Like all the stuff about unity that Joe Biden has said rings extremely hollow, unless of course, I mean, they're still bumping this narrative that, Trump voters are Nazis, which they just,
Right.
unless they join hands and start working on pulling back that narrative, their calls of unity are going to fall on deaf ears. And I like that narrative is so powerful to them strategically, electorally. And I know this is completely cynical because it's based on a fucking lie, which drives me crazy, as someone who's a truth seeker. This is one of the reasons why I am more standoffish with politics than a lot of people, is because, man, I want to know what really happened. I want to know the actual truth of the situation. And when you become a partisan, the first thing to go is truth. Like, truth is out the window.